Hello, in today's video I thought I would talk about a few things having to do with kind of the setup of watercolor and also some of the tools I use. And the first one is going to be talking about the masking tape that I use, and I do have a couple other videos. I will try to remember to link those, and I've gone over some of this before in those videos, but I wanted to clarify a few things. I've had people ask, one, do I need to use the same tape you're using? And no, not necessarily. You might find other tape that will work for you. I do know some people like the clear packing tape instead of the masking tape that I use. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me grab these. For a painting in watercolor, I tend to work very realistically. So for this painting that I'm getting set up to work with someone on, we're going to start in the background, and because of that I want to protect the edges that are part of these flowers. And to do that, you could use masking fluid or you could use masking tape. And masking tape has become my preferred method for masking objects in my painting because I can get cleaner edges than I can with masking fluid. So sometimes I do have to use masking fluid on little tiny shapes or shapes that are a little more involved, but majority of my paintings now I mask with masking tape. And this is the masking tape that I use, and one of the things that you need to look for, and this is very important because this masking tape is extra adhesion. It will hold on to your paper better, and so the brand is Scotch, and I think you can see that there in the camera. And then if you look for number 2020, that will be the tape that, let me see if I can find it. It says inside, it says strong adhesive, and it's kind of right in that area. So I purchased mine right now from my local hardware store. If you have a Home Depot or a Lowe's, it would be in the paint department area, most likely. And I would kind of not worry about the labels that are on the boxes or on the shelf, but if you just pick up the tape and look inside the label and look for the number 2020, then you'll know it's the same tape. Now, when I am working on a painting and I'm using the masking tape to mask with, one thing to note is that you need to be using professional or artist grade watercolor paper, 100% cotton paper, and even some of those don't work very well with masking tape. So before you apply the tape to your painting, I would do a test on a separate piece of paper, same kind of paper you're going to be using, and see if when you try to remove the tape, if it possibly tears your paper. So you don't want that to happen to your actual painting, so just be aware that that is a possibility. And I have all three sizes, so I have a 1 inch, I think it's probably 1.5 inch, and then the 2 inch. I tend to use the 2 inch for the majority of my masking because I can lay it down and cut out whatever shape I need to, and it's going to cover a big area. So the other thing to note is, and I think I mentioned this in some of the other videos, but it may just not have registered, is that when you go to lay the tape down, I lay one strip at a time. I cut the edges on that strip of tape, and it might be on both sides of the tape. Then I lay the next strip down. You can lay the strips any way you want. So if it makes more sense to lay them horizontally and cut the edges, then you could do that. But if you are, say for instance, I did, so for instance, I did this painting where I masked the aspen trees using the masking tape. And instead of going this direction, laying it horizontally across and having lots of overlaps and cuts and everything, I took my 2 inch masking tape and I just ran it down this direction. Sometimes you need to angle it just a little bit, but the idea is to lay the tape down and have as few overlapping edges as you can. So one of my overlapping edges is right here. And I think you might be able to see that. It's just a slightly darker area in the tape. And then same thing down here where it overlapped again. And when I'm doing something where I need to lay down a strip and then cut and then lay down the next strip, I do not overlap them and lay every strip down and then do my cuts. I do one piece of tape at a time, make the cuts, and then do the next strip. So for this painting, this is a little different in that because the majority of the painting over here is several flowers and it's a big shape, I don't necessarily need to cover the whole thing. Some of my paintings where maybe I have background here and then I have background up in here and maybe I'd have some here, I might go ahead and mask the main subject of the painting over the whole thing and cover it completely so that I'm protecting it. But because for this one, the background is just on this side and then there's a little bit down in here, I can actually just mask part of this and then around this shape to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally get some of my background onto my main subject. So without further ado, I will get going on this. And for this, if I have a 2-inch wide strip, I will probably be good because you know, I doubt if I'm painting here I'm going to come over a whole 2 inches. However, this little piece right here is farther back. It's, you know, over here, and then the next part of the flower is, oh, maybe an inch to an inch and a half away. So I can start by, maybe I'll go at an angle here. Go at an angle and try to catch the edges. So I think, let me zoom in. It's going to say, I think you'll be able to see the pencil line through there. Okay, so I'll just lay this down. And if you can, hopefully you can see that pencil line through there. Now, when I'm coming down, there is some more of the drawing here. And there's a little bit down here at the bottom that are a part of the flowers. So because I'm going at an angle, I'll just continue that angle, but there's going to be a big piece over here that I will cut off. I'm going to zoom back out. So I will start with that. And when you go to cut the tape, I know this may seem counterintuitive, or maybe it's totally makes sense. I use the clickable blades, so I think this happens to be a Scotch brand, but you can get all kinds of blades like this. And basically, this blade here is in pieces that will break apart. So if you see those lines, that's where it breaks. And most of these have a piece on the handle that you can pull off, and where that little slit is where I put that on the blade and then just break it off. So now I have a new blade out, and it is very important if you're going to do this kind of masking to have a sharp blade. So if your blade is even somewhat dull, even just a little bit, you can press too hard and you'll either groove your paper because you're pressing too hard, or you might actually cut through your watercolor paper. So it is a gentle touch when you're cutting and a very sharp blade. So I'm just going to start off the paper, and then I will come around, and the curved shapes can be a touch harder to cut than straight lines, so it can take practice, and just also how much pressure you need to use. Let's see. The other thing that can be a little hard with this kind of mask or masking is keeping your hand out of the way so you can see what you're masking. Okay, so I'm just continuing down the shape, and when I get down a little ways here, I will go ahead and, oops, went past my line a little bit. I'll go ahead and go off the edge of the tape here so you can see, hopefully, that I am cutting the paper. Plus, this is good for me to do as well to make sure that I am pressing hard enough. Now, there are a couple places here where the tape didn't quite get cut. And so I am having to go back right there. So one, it can take practice to make sure you're not cutting through the paper, but also it can take a little bit of practice to make sure that you're cutting hard enough. And right now I'm getting some rather random edges here because I'm not quite pressing hard enough. And I'm not sure, actually this blade kind of looks like it's been used before because I've cut some things. So where, I don't know if you can tell, but see how it looks a little lighter toward the tip area right here? That's probably because I was cutting something and I ended up using that second blade in as well. So I'm going to take that one off too, just to make sure that I am using a sharp blade. Okay, let me go, I'm going to go back over this line. Because I should not have to give it too much pressure. It should just be a light amount. And then I'm going to start off with this new blade. Same kind of pressure I was using. My roll here at the bottom is in the way. I'm just going to cut that off. Okay. And then down here, I've got a tip that is just a little tiny bit of that leaf sticking over the tape. So I'm going to ignore that because when I come back with my next piece of tape, I can put that on, I'll include that shape then. And see, you can see that this, I think you can see, that this seems to be coming off easier. I have a little piece here that I need to go around. Okay. And then I did cut across that piece of tape, and so I left a little strip there. So in general, for me, I find this kind of masking much quicker. I don't have to wait for anything to dry. I'm not looking at odd colors because some masking fluid will have like fluorescent orange or fluorescent yellow in it, and I don't want to see those colors when I'm working with my painting because it can change what I'm looking at. Alright, so I have that first strip down. I've cut through it. Now, as I said, I don't necessarily need to cover this whole thing. I just need to make sure that when I'm doing the background, I don't accidentally get my brush across something and possibly get some paint on my flowers. So because there's a little point here, even though I've covered this whole edge, this area is a danger area because I could bring my brush and possibly go across the tape right there. So I could at this point take a 1/2 inch tape and run it on there, but I also have some places down here that I still need to mask. Sorry, my head keeps going in and out of the camera angle there. You can ignore me. Alright, so this is the 1.5 inch tape, and so I'm going to see if no, it's not quite far enough in because I have some lines down here that would maybe be a problem. So I'm just going to do another piece of 2-inch tape. And it'll just be a little wide for this application in some places. Now I try to go at least 1/8 of an inch over, so you can see where it's lapping over the previous layer, but sometimes I will even go more than that. And I did catch the tip of the leaf down here. All right, so, and then you do want to give it a little bit of pressure, make sure that your tape is down and that your overlap is pressed together so that you don't end up possibly getting paint under there. So this would be the way that if I were going to mask this whole thing with masking tape, or a big portion of it, that I would do. So I would come back through, and now I have a place right down here that I need to cut. I don't have to cut this side for this image, so you won't see that. But I will get this side done, and then I will get this last little piece over here taken care of. Now, one thing that I will do if I'm using masking fluid, and I maybe don't want to mask the whole thing, but I'm doing this kind of thing where I'm masking the edges just to make sure that I don't come in too far with my background. Sorry, 1 second here. There's a tip on this I want to make a little narrower. Also, when I'm throwing the blades away, I wrap them up in a piece of tape, and just to make sure that myself or anyone else will not get cut with them. Okay, so I have that edge cut and ready, and let me move that. Okay, and then over in here where I mentioned that there's some background color in here, I'm going to go ahead and use the masking tape, and I just need to go over those edges by a little bit. And my tape, there we go. I want to try to have my tape as smooth as I can, because if I have it with some bumps and things in there, watercolor could get underneath it. So you do want to have it as smooth as you can. So then this piece of tape here, I will have to lay another piece right here. So I'll just bring this down right there, and I can take that off. And I did not press so hard. There is no groove in my paper, so I'm not feeling any issue there. Okay, go ahead and take that. And what was I going to say? Something about, oh, for me, I appreciate having these shapes protected, and then I work on the background, and then later I will remove the mask and I can then paint my main subject. Okay. Same thing here. So I'm going to speed this next section up so it's the same thing that I mentioned for all of this. I'm just going around the shape, and then I'll pause it when I'm done. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed is on this shape right here, I'm actually taking this off because I'm going to use it down here. So there are some overlaps that are happening because I'm using the bigger tape, and I just had extra that I could use for this last little piece here. So I'm going to finish up. Now, one of the things that I started to mention, and then I got distracted and forgot what I was going to say, is when I'm using masking fluid, if I mask a bigger shape like this, and maybe I just mask the edges and around the shape that is going to be the background, if I have a big area that is needing to stay without color on it, so white for now, sometimes what I will do with masking fluid is I'll just draw an X to remind myself, don't paint in this area when you're putting the background on. But you could do that same kind of thing with masking tape. So I could just take an extra piece here and just kind of randomly lay it on there, and that just reminds you, oh yeah, this is something I don't want to put any paint on. So we get distracted and we get busy and then we forget what we're doing. And so when I'm working with the masking fluid, it's easy to put just like an X with the masking fluid on my paper. The other thing to know is that if you cut a piece and you realize, oh, I cut in too deep and so I didn't get to my edge, you can come back with masking fluid and you can mask over the edge if you need to. All right, so then I have two pieces here that are branches, and technically I wouldn't necessarily have to do this one because it is a little darker than what my background will be, but I'm going to just go ahead and mask the branches just to make sure that I don't have any issues with those. Okay, and I did go slightly, I adjusted the tape so that it was high on this branch so that I can take this piece and use it down here. All right, now here's an area that I would want to avoid. So if I were masking, you know, because I have cut each strip, then I'm not going to have like 3 or 4 layers of tape that I would have to try to cut through, or cut one piece and then the next, that type of thing. So even though maybe it feels like you could save time, what you tend to do is press too hard, or it just becomes really hard to cut the shape that you need because you've got too many layers to deal with. Okay, and that piece. All right. So this is ready. Again, I could just lay some of this on there. One thing to know about masking tape, it is still sort of like masking fluid in the sense that you don't want to have it in a hot car for a long time. You should avoid leaving it on your paper for a really long time. I have left things on for about 3 months without an issue. But it depends on the part of the country you live in. It depends on humidity in your area, maybe. So both masking fluid and masking tape could get stuck to your paper. Actually, masking tape, it would be more about leaving a sticky residue on your paper. So you have to be careful of that. And I would just test it and see if you like the process and see if it works for you. So when we go to paint this, then we can paint the background and we can paint in here the background colors. And then when that's all dry and we're happy with our background, then we will remove this. And then we can decide if we need mask anywhere else, and we might reapply something either with masking tape or masking fluid. But we've given ourselves a good base to get our painting started. Okay, so the other thing to mention, actually I don't need to move any of that, is that I keep having people ask, what brushes do you use? So I am going to just pull out the brand of brushes that I tend to use now. Some of my older videos, there's another brush in there that was my main brush, but now I use the Silver Black Velvet brand. And I think this one has a little writing on it. They've worn off some. But Silver is the company, and then the line, the watercolor brush line that these are, is Black Velvet. And my biggest brush is a number 20 round, so that's what this one is. And then these are a couple of my other ones. I have some smaller ones. I have a flat brush. That's the Silver Black Velvet series. And I really like them because they are blend brushes. So they have both natural hair and synthetic bristles, and they hold a lot of water and paint. And that's what I'm looking for with my brush, besides the fact that I want a good sharp point. So for me, I can use a big brush and paint across a big portion of my painting and even get into small areas because it's got a nice tip to it. At some point I may move down to smaller brushes, but I tend to paint a lot of the paintings that I do with this brush in the beginning, and then I might slowly move to a smaller brush for details. So that's my brush, and then the other tip for this video is that when I go to dry my brushes, I lay them flat. So either on my palette, I might just lay them on there after I've cleaned it and let them sit on the palette, and they can just dry that way. Sometimes I'll set them up above my palette. You can just set them on your table or in your brush holder. And the idea is that with watercolor brushes specifically, there may be a need for other kinds, but if the water in your brush gets down into the handle, then it could loosen this part of your brush from the handle. Also, most of these handles are wood, and so they can crack. So you do not want to store your brushes in a container where the brushes are standing up on end. They can if they're dry, but if they are wet, then they need to be laid down, or find a brush holder where you can clip your brushes in upside down, and that will let the water drip out of your brush and keep this part of your brush from going bad and basically loosening up. There are some options online, so if you just look up paintbrush holder and go to wherever your favorite art purchasing place is, then you should be able to find some holders. I just tend to set mine flat, so there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to even protect your brushes a little more, paintbrush holder where you can hang them upside down is a good option. So I hope these tips were helpful to you today, and I hope you'll give some or all of them a try. And I will see you next month, and hopefully I will be able to get a video out sooner next month. See you then. Bye.